Welcome, students. I'm Amy, and you've probably already watched one video already, some of you. As you know, we're going to meet each other on the 28th, and after that, we'll meet again when you have your supplies. So you may be watching this a little bit later, but I wanted to create this video for both of my classes that use primarily paint, which is painting, beginning, intermediate, and studio painting, which are combined, and color theory. It's really important that you take good care of your materials and use them properly, not only because they're expensive, but because the result you'll get on your projects is much better if you have an organized palette and good paint consistency. So I wanted to show you basically how to set up your palette, in this case for a value scale. You'll be doing scales in both classes. In color theory, we won't be using just a flat black and white scale because black and white is used primarily in beginning painting and also in drawing and also in basic design. When you get to color theory, we're exploring a different element, and yet the materials, the mixing, the palette knife action, all of that is the same. So I wanted to review that if you haven't used paint before. It'll give you a good introduction. And if you've taken painting before, this is sort of a recap. Plus, a lot of people develop poor habits. Painting has, and making projects for color theory has a degree of discipline in terms of your palette, the consistency, what kind of brushes you use, how you use them, how you deliver the paint, and also how you take care of your tools afterwards. Acrylic dries really quickly, so you can't leave it sitting on a brush for a prolonged period of time. It'll ruin a brush, it'll make it bend on the ends. This one's just stained from another brighter paint. But basically your brushes are going to be fairly clean starting out. And because you're only buying the brushes that I listed, I won't have a problem with you using crappy brushes. There's a lot of crappy brushes out there. And so you want to always have soft white nylon that are soft but reactive, very crisp and bouncy. There's lots of other kind of natural hair brushes out there that are very, very expensive. But for our purposes, I got the least expensive, good brushes I could. And when you're painting or painting on a design, you always want to have a variety of flat and round brushes. These are round, they come to a point, they're only used for lines. These are flat and bright. Bright and flat are simply a rectangle versus a square, but it's the same concept. They're designed to create a hard edge and to fill shapes. So shapes and lines. We're going to be using both in our paintings and designs, but in a value scale or any kind of scale, you're going to be using flat brushes. So first I'm going to demonstrate this process and how you set it up, how to mix, and then I'm going to turn this thing off and do another video later of how to wash your brushes, care for your brushes. First thing to know, before, in case I forget later, is never store them down into the water jug. They get totally ruined. And never leave the paint on there too long. Always rinse them when you're in the middle of a process and put it upside down so that the brush is up. Either that or lay it flat or put it in a tool bin. When you do the initial rinsing, you have to push to the bottom. It's not like really hard pressure, but it's enough to get the paint out, squeeze it out, reshape it, set it aside if you're in the middle. And then when you're doing a longer break or an ending for the day, I'll show you that later, the extensive brush cleaning strategy. Palette knife needs to be cleaned a lot too. If it gets paint on it and sticks on there, it's garbage. You can't use it, it's a waste. So you always want to make sure paint doesn't dry on here. You can put that in the water, just not long enough to rust overnight or something, but just wipe it down on occasion. Keep it clean and new. All right, okay, so the paint that I have here at home is heavy duty. It's a lot thicker, a lot more, way more expensive, but the consistency is thicker, but it's the same process. I just have to mix a little bit more than you do, and I might have to use a medium if I get a little sticky. Sticky isn't good with acrylic because the minute things are sticky, you can't blend, you can't do much. I'm using a tray, which I do not recommend for you to use. Reason being, you end up putting paint in your household sink. That's not good. Same with the classroom. So the beauty of a disposable palette paper pad, which is what is on your list, you just take it off and throw it in the garbage, even if it has a little paint on it. If you try to wipe this down or clean this down, if you don't have an industrial artist studio sink, it's not going to work. So just order the palette paper. You'll have leftovers for another class later. And just remember, again, if I forget, it's always a shiny side up. If you have a pad, you can just leave it on the pad, but if you don't, you'll tape it to your right hand side if you're right and tape it securely. Whatever it is you're mixing on has to be seriously heavy or seriously taped down, because the palette knife is aggressive and we have to be able to have force. So when we mix our values, I'm not going to go crazy just because I'm not filling a size that you are right now. I would say when you put this out there, 5 times that amount. That's white. Literally. I mean, the bigger the pile, the better when you're going to be painting for a few hours. But I'm just doing one little scale, so. See how little black I have? Boom. Nothing. So if you do 5 times this amount, 5 times that amount, or even 3 times that amount, you'll be good. So before you start, and we're always going to start with the white because you want to keep it clean, make sure your palette knife's clean, you don't have charcoal on it or whatever. And you always have the biggest possible size jar of water you can get. Big open mouth jar. And I dip it in water, just a little. And again, in my case, I might need a little more water. But Basics is not a very thick paint. Now watch how I massage and maneuver this. I'm using both sides. I'm scraping completely up. I'm using quite a bit of physical force. The reason we had on the ordering list the metal, these kind of palette knives are designed to last for years and to be able to really use them properly. If you buy a plastic knife, it'll break in 20 seconds if you're mixing properly. Those are horrible. And if you don't have the bend, you're in trouble too. It has to have the bend and it has to have the teardrop width across. Palette knives that are small and narrow, it's like you might as well be using a needle and thread. It just does nothing unless you're using it to paint with, which is another situation. But for mixing, it's got to be. See how long I'm doing this? I could do this for a while. The mixing should be more important than the painting. If you get your palette organized, however this thing looks is how your painting's going to look, and it's how your scale's going to look for this warm-up. It should be like a little watered down cake frosting, and a painting should look creamy like that. It's not quite as thick as butter. I guess it's like a margarine, or like I can't believe it's not butter consistency. So this is getting there. But see how I maneuver it even though it's just white? Now, I could do the same if I had another palette knife with the black. But because I don't, you'll have to clean that and put it in there. So what I usually do is when you start the scale, I'll just do it right here, in fact. I just take one, you're going to be doing a 2x2, those of you in painting. So, but in this case, I'll just show you, like if you take a little here, just to get this one out of the way. Let me just put this here as an example. When you're doing your scale, you're going to put that solid black on that square. But that way you don't have to get another, see, because then this is dirty. So this is just a shortcut. There's ways around it. But if I take another brush just to get this on the scale, because the first scale you'll see on the warm-up info is it starts on one end white and one on black. So if I can get these out of the way while I'm mixing this, That's a great shortcut. But if you don't, you don't. But again, you put it in here, push it to the bottom, put this one in here, push it to the bottom. But you see now my water's contaminated, which is why I'm doing just these together. So I would just, it's just, you don't even need to do it that way. It just saves you time. All right, so here, this is going to be my lightest. That's going to be my darkest. And I'm going to start pulling piles in, and I'm going to make some value steps between white and black. There's many different kinds of value steps. We're going to do a step 5. On that board, when you make your grid, we're going to actually do the warm-ups. And this applies just to painting underneath. The only thing on color that really applies here, that color class, is for you to see this how to use your supplies. Mixing and consistency. All right, so however these piles look is how your picture's going to look. So I'm going to steal a dot of black and place it here. And I'm going to make the lightest gray I can. Everybody makes this one too dark. You can see immediately when you do this how the black just takes over. It's hard to see, so I'll show you. See how it's too dark? Because I have to get to black in 5 steps, not in 3 or 4. So I'm going to put a little more white in here. It's got to be close to white. Now the thing is, again with the palette knife, you have to see the streaks that are still on the knife. You got to go top and bottom. You got to pick up the whole pile, push it, move it around, scrape it around, pick it up again. Do this all this kind of time so that it's like as if it came out of the tube, only a better consistency. That looks, that's all right. I don't know, I'm going to put a little more white in it. But see how I'm not pulling black over here? I'm just using white piles. Yellow operates similarly in a color wheel. It gets eaten up by everything, just like white does. That's why we usually go through, I'd say, about 6 or 7 times as much white as we do black. Now this may change as I start going along, but I'm going to keep moving now. I'm going to mix a middle value. The middle value is neither here nor there. It's too dark. You can see the jump. It's way too dark. In fact, I'm going to put it over there and use this whole pile to see if I can knock that out. Way too dark. Okay, I'm going to break this down. I'm going to combine it with this one because I've got extra white over there. The best thing you can do when you can figure it out is to not have to keep grabbing tubes of paint. You should be able to assess what you need on your palette before doing that. This is a better middle gray right here. And you can also see that very quickly I'm running out of space on this palette. That's another thing people do is they buy these tiny little palette knives. I mean, well, besides palette knives, they're little tiny plates that just don't hold enough space, and then you can't mix properly. So in a way, you know, I started with white, I started weaving in black, I got too dark, which is so common, and now I've sort of found the middle ground. So it's a lot of trial and error, like any artistic process. And now in order for me to make sure that's in the middle, I need to mix a dark gray and another light gray, which I kind of blew over there. It was not enough and not enough light. But then again, I'm minimizing the process just because I'm only planning on doing a small scale where you guys are going to be doing a big one. Well, big one and two. I'm getting somewhere. Black, dark gray, middle gray, white, missing a light gray, and there's no way with this I'm going to have a light enough reaction. So I got to really wipe this thing off. And you always want to use it up as best you can, the paint that's on there, before you wipe it off. But I've got my black that I can reapply if I get it dirty. I've got my dark gray. I've got my middle gray. And now in order for me, and this is what I mean about the palette knife, always keep a good paper towel with you all the time. And you're going to be changing your water quite a bit too. So you got to figure out what sink in the house or bathroom, kitchen, whatever. If you're lucky, you'll have one of those in the garage, or you can even use a hose or just somewhere to keep replacing your water. But we don't want to dump paint anywhere. We're going to have some on the palette paper and paper towels that gets thrown in the garbage, but we don't want to create anything toxic or cause plumbing problems. So after this, I'll show you that cleaning step, and then I'm also going to make a video on the actual filling in of the scale. So I'm going to add a little more white just because I feel like I'm going to need it, because I need to use this one now for my value that I over saturated with black. And I'm going to need white, so I'll just leave it there. I can maneuver it later when I do the scale. But you can see it's like that, step by step by step. And a lot of times when you get to a place where you think it's right and you paint it onto your surface, what happens with acrylic paint is that it dries darker, which is really unfortunate, because when you're trying to get a light value, you leave for the day, you come back and it's dark. It's like you have to start all over. So basically, just in the back of your mind, always remember to err on the side of light. If you think it's this value, make it a little lighter, because tomorrow it's going to be that value. It's just one of those difficult things, but you get used to it. Just always work favoring the light. Now I only have 5 steps, so it's okay if it jumps, as long as it jumps equally. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I'm in pretty good shape right here. This might be a little light, but again, if they're too light or too dark, you have to let them dry completely, which is usually about 5-10 minutes, sometimes more, and then you're going to paint over them. But never paint thick to the point where you can't paint over, because then you're going to get these weird textural dry strips or bumpy marks. The consistency has to be good on here and good with the water and the brush, because we want to have opportunities to paint over and over and over something. Painting is never about one hit. It's always like you do one, let it dry, go over. It's the opposite of watercolor. Go back, build substance. And you can't build substance if you just clunk the paint on there, because then you know what you have to do is get sandpaper. And it's a whole deal to try to get rid of that texture. So we're going to be very neurotically, gently smooth in our application. Not just on the warm-ups, but on the actual projects. It's really important, especially when you're working smaller, which I have changed my projects to accommodate this situation we're in. All right, okay, so I think we're good. I think that's what I wanted to show you. I'm going to do another one of washing brushes and another one of actually putting these on a scale, because we're going to do, this is for painting, we're going to do a 5-step hard edge scale, which is using the flat brush to create slow, clean sides in a step-by-step scale shapes. And then we're going to do another exercise using blending, which is super important. Crisscrossy shapes across. So movements to create this smooth, beautiful, luscious surface. Every project that I'm having you guys do is a combo of those things, hard edge and blending. So we want to make sure in every warm-up, in every project, you have a sense of a mastery to some degree of techniques, systems, uses of materials, so that when we move into the project itself, it'll flow much better. So I apologize if I ramble sometimes, but the frustration of not being able to be in the classroom and just, fluid in the moment and explain things as we go based on what you're working on. I'm going to do my very best to make up for that by doing as many videos as I can, and hopefully you'll pick up tidbits here and there. And I will see you at the sink when we do our washing. And then I'll see you at the scales. Bye.